Hello, welcome to this second talk co-organized by Asociación de Profesores de Inglés de Bahía Blanca and Instituto Superior Juan XXIII English Department. Today we have a special speaker because Valeria Bauduco was a student here at Instituto Juan XXIII. She's a graduate of the institution, and special to me because after being my student, of course, she was my student too. She was my workmate. We worked together for many years until she moved to the United Kingdom, where she has lived ever since. Today I feel deep satisfaction to see how a former student, a colleague, has grown professionally. Vale is a teacher, a professional who has never stopped learning, studying, researching, and that's why today we count with her presence. Before this short introduction, I would like to end up, and before listening to Analia Leiros, the president of the association, who's going to give to open the talk formally, I would like to say that Vale was a brilliant student. She's a better professional and a great person. So that's a wonderful combination. Okay, Analia, now it's your turn.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. And let me introduce you to Valeria Bauduco. Valeria has been working in ELT for over 10 years now. She's a graduate from Instituto Superior Juan XXIII, holds a licenciatura in English Linguistics from Universidad Nacional del Litoral, and completed her Trinity Deep TESOL at the beginning of 2020. She taught English in secondary schools and language schools in Bahía Blanca for more than 7 years. Since she moved to the UK in 2017, she has been working as a materials writer for an international English language school, as well as teaching Spanish in one of London's biggest Spanish centers. She's interested in trends and tools that help us transform the language classroom in a place where learners can discover the world through English. So, Valeria, we are very happy to have you here with us today. And please make sure your mics are off. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for the warm welcome. It's a treat for me to be here and to be among friends and among colleagues and among people I've walked through the corridors of Juan XXIII for so long. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about critical thinking and my journey through critical thinking. And well, I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to talk about, oops, I haven't properly done this one. There you go. So we're going to explore a little bit about critical thinking, and I thought that the best way to tell you or to introduce the topic was to tell you a little bit about my journey through critical thinking. So the company I work for, Oxford International, delivers short summer courses, English courses for students from all over the place. And one unique feature of this company is that we work with our own materials. We create the materials in-house, and the materials are revised every 4 years or recreated every 4 years. And last year was the time or the year we had to do this. And we started conceptualizing the new syllabus, and we said, okay, what do we want to include in this particular syllabus? And we came up with the idea that we wanted a syllabus that was tailored for 21st century students, that gave them 21st century skills. And so we started researching for 21st century skills, and one of the 21st century skills was critical thinking. And when I saw this critical thinking title, I said, this is my time. I am a very critical person. I criticize anything and everything. So critical thinking is going to come up very, very easy for me. But the more I went into critical thinking, the more I realized that critical thinking has nothing to do with being critical or criticizing other things. So before we move in, I would like you to tell me what critical thinking is for you. So if you could open your chat boxes now and tell me in a few words, maybe a couple of sentences, what critical thinking is for you, to see where we are in terms of definition. So I'm going to be reading you. So a couple of sentences from you, please, telling me what you think critical thinking is, or what you have heard of. Let's see, no participation so far. I cannot see anybody in the chat writing, please. Don't be shy. So what do you think? It can be words, it can be concepts. What is it for you? Cannot see much there. Maybe it's because it is the beginning of the winter holidays and nobody's very much awake. Nobody has said anything. Okay, Sandra, thank you. Critical thinking includes reflection, certainly does. Something else? Another brave soul trying to say what critical thinking is? It's a very critical thinking activity to do at this time in the morning. Critical thinking in different ways, using both hemispheres of the brains. Okay, interesting. You said, let's speak about what you think. Okay, that will be metacognition. Yeah, Gary, to explore deep, simple questions. Okay, cool. One more, and I'll consider this done. And Millie, for me, it's the analysis of an issue to a form of judgment. Okay, cool. Well, you know that when I started looking for a definition of critical thinking, I found a variety of things all over the place. There is even a critical thinking organization that have their own website, and their definition for critical thinking is like 4 paragraphs long. So that didn't reflect what I wanted to translate into my materials. And I found a definition of critical thinking that resonated with me from an ELT point of view. And that was this one that I found. So critical thinking is commonly defined as a metacognitive process consisting of a number of cognitive skills and a variety of personal dispositions that, when used appropriately, increases the chances of producing a logical solution to a problem or a valid conclusion to an argument. It's a long paragraph, but in itself we can take 3 main concepts out of this one. For example, we can say that critical thinking is made up of dispositions, that is to say, personal attitudes to the world, and of cognitive skills, that is to say, mental abilities that we use to think and learn. So these 2 things combined create what we call a metacognitive process, a reflective process that allows us to regulate our own learning process. So to understand critical thinking, it seems to me that we have to understand the 2 first components of this definition, that is to say, dispositions and cognitive skills. So what are the dispositions that we are looking for in a critical thinker? First is the inquisitiveness, that intrinsic curiosity for the world. Then it is open-mindedness, being cognitively flexible, accepting of new ideas. Attentiveness, that willingness to concentrate and to focus on the information that comes to us. Truth-seeking, which is the idea or the necessity to be well-informed. Creativity, the possibility or the capability of creating ideas outside the box. Skepticism, challenging ideas that come to us, not taking anything for granted. And finally, what one of you said, reflection, the ability to reflect on our own attitudes. And as regards cognitive skills, or to start analyzing the cognitive skills behind critical thinking, we need to explore the theory underpinning this concept, and that is Bloom's taxonomy of learning objectives, which you have probably seen before, and you're probably very aware of, because they are a toolbox for teachers and materials writers to write their materials and to challenge students at the right cognitive level. So what is Bloom's taxonomy? In a very abridged version of the definition, it's a classification system for cognitive skills, for those learning skills that go on inside the mind. So what he did back in the day, back in 1956, was to put them in this sort of pyramid that we see here, and to name all of the levels with nouns, for example, knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, because these are the products that the different cognitive skills aim at obtaining. Later on in 2001, Anderson revised this pyramid or this taxonomy and added some aspects to it and also changed these nouns for verbs. And there are many representations, or visual representations of this Bloom's of this Anderson's new taxonomy. But I have chosen to use one that is represented in a sort of a staircase, because if we think about it as the journey that our students need to take from the very, let's say, lower points of learning into the more difficult stages of the cognitive process, a staircase is quite representative of that. So these cognitive skills here have been classified into 6 different levels, as you can see, starting from remembering, understanding, applying, and then moving on to analysis, evaluating, and creating. Notice that the last step in this staircase was not present in Bloom's taxonomy. They have added this new step in the revised version of the taxonomy. So you might be wondering what happens at each of these stages. Well, at a remembering level, a student can memorize, recall, or remember information that we give them. Take, for example, us teaching them a set of vocabulary on, I don't know, furniture or a grammar rule. So at this level, a student can remember what we tell them and memorize this information. At an understanding level, a student can make connections with previous knowledge. And for example, if we have already taught them how to build or how to construct a comparative form, they will see an adjective with an ER ending and associate the concept that we taught them before with the new word that they have in front of them. And so they are able to make connection and say, okay, good, this is a comparative as the teacher told me. At an applying level, a student can use the information in a different task. Usually this is what happens in the controlled practice stage of our lessons. So now that they know the rule behind comparatives, they can complete a fill in the gap activity that will give them some adjectives, and they have to put them back in the text in the comparative form. These 3 levels, remembering, understanding, and applying, are what we know as lower order thinking skills. And then things get a bit more interesting. At an analyzing level, students can distinguish between the different parts of a concept. For example, given a paragraph or a text, a student can tell that there are different ideas there. They cannot yet tell us what the difference is, but they can understand that there are different ideas. Similarly, if we give them some examples of a superlative form or of a superlative sentences, they will be able to say that there are different elements to the sentence. They will be able to identify the, most, and if we're talking about the short adjective, the EST ending. Analyzing is closely related to the next level of this taxonomy, which is evaluating. Students, now that they have dissected the part of the concept, they can make judgments and assert and give value to each of the parts of what they have analyzed. So, for example, once they have split or separated the different parts of a paragraph, they can now say that some of these ideas are supportive arguments and some of them are main arguments. Similarly, they can risk it and create a hypothesis or a rule as how to the superlatives work in English. And finally, once they have gone through all these steps in the staircase, they can there create something new. And this is what we know as the production stage of our lessons, when they can actually make the language their own and produce something with what we have given or what we have told them. These last 3 steps of this Bloom's taxonomy or Anderson's taxonomy is what we call high order thinking skills. So if we think, this is my student, this is Juan. If we think of this as a staircase, our aim as teachers is to take our students up in the staircase, one step at a time, and challenge them to keep on learning and to keep on increasing the complexity of the cognitive processes that they are working with in their minds when they are learning a language. So at a very lower level, he will be able to recall information, then he will be able to explain concepts or say, yes, this is the comparative. Then they will be able to use the comparative in one of those little grammar exercises that we give them. Then he will be able to break out the rule and make it his own. Then he will assess different value. Okay, the most important bit of a comparative form is the ER ending. Sometimes when I'm not talking about irregular forms. And finally, they will be able to create their own sentences comparing the 2 siblings. So this is more or less what we based our cognitive skills idea on. But before we move on, I would like you to have a look at this. These are 3 activities that I found in books that we have all worked with. So have a look at them, at exercises 1, 2, and 3, and tell me at which level we are challenging our students. What levels in this taxonomy, in this staircase that we just saw, do you think that we are asking our students to place themselves? So again, open up your chat boxes and tell me, what do you think? What are the levels of the cognitive skills behind each of these activities? This might take more time. Can you see your thinking faces, and you're trying to recognize which book did I take these things from? You have all worked with them. 3 applying in a controlled context. Thank you, Sandra. Let's see which other guesses we have. Oh yeah, lower levels, says Agustina or Laura through YouTube. Very good. Thank you, Agustina, for that. Giselle says lower levels. Gisela says applying in a controlled context. Yes, very good. Well, yeah. So most of them, remember, first what we do is ask our little one to remember the jobs vocabulary set that we have taught him, and then understand the concept from the picture, and then put it back into a crossword. Second exercise, similar. He's recalling information, and by understanding the different letters, he's putting the letters in order, not ground-thinking processes there, groundbreaking processes. And in number 3, we're asking them to understand the definition and then match it to the words that they have already seen. So as you very well said, we are all working with very lower levels of cognitive skills, so we are still working with lots. And this is a tendency that we language teachers have. We love this kind of exercises, and we love having students do this kind of exercise. And occasionally, we go pendular, and we go from these very low levels into the creative bit of the staircase, and we come into the class all inspired and say, okay, now we're going to create a role play between a doctor and an engineer about their jobs. And this is where we get all creative. However, when we are doing this, when we are going from one extreme to the other, we are forgetting that critical thinking skills happen in the middle bits of the staircase. They happen at an applying, analyzing, and evaluating levels. And this is where we need to concentrate our practice and our activities. So now we're going to have a look at some ideas of critical thinking activities that ask our students to think about the language and think through the language. By thinking about the language, they are becoming language explorers. We want them to own the content, to see language, to see English in this case, as a set of, as an information, as a piece of information, as a concept that they need to dissect and own and make their own, so they can be creative with. And we are also going to see activities that ask students to think through the language. English becomes a means to an end, to analyze concepts or ideas that should be, and I said should because if they are not meaningful or interesting for students or not authentic enough, we are not going to achieve the critical thinking stages that we want to achieve. So let's have a look at these ideas that explore critical thinking activities from very low levels of proficiency into higher ones. At A2 levels and above, we can ask students to classify vocabulary. We give them a set of vocabularies, let's say sports, and then we ask them to classify them according to the fact they need a ball or they don't need a ball. They can be done outside or indoors. And what are we doing when we ask them to classify vocabulary according to given criteria? We're asking them first to recall the information, understand what they are talking about, apply it to a different concept, and then exploring each of the concepts in particular and seeing what each of the sports needs and where it can take place. So for example, football, oh yeah, football is played with a ball, so it goes in the balls category, but it also goes in the outdoors category because it's mostly played outside. So I'm asking them to analyze the concepts in particular and then place them into the different categories I've given them. We can ask them, or we should ask them, to take an inductive approach to grammar. That is to say, we should guide students to approach grammars and then having them discover what the grammar rule we're trying to teach is. If they take responsibility for their own learning and they slowly but firmly discover what the grammar rule is about, this is a concept that is going to be learned for life instead of the teacher preaching or lecturing about the grammar rule behind the past simple tense. In text or when practicing reading skills, we can ask the students to compare, register, give them an email and give them a letter, and ask them to analyze which are the clues that the language gives you to say that, or which are the examples of language that we're going to use in a letter and which are the ones that we're going to use in an email. So they're going to become language explorers and become interested in what happens in front of them. We can also ask them to work through the language. We give them a story, anything that's interesting for them. It can be a horror story, a sci-fi story. And we stop in the last paragraph and we say, okay, what happens next? And we put them in pairs or small groups and ask them to give us their best guess at what happens next. What are they going to be doing with this? First, they're going to be analyzing all the elements of the story. With the elements of the story, they are going to create possible outcomes. From these possible outcomes, they are going to evaluate all of them according to those features of the story they analyzed before, and they're going to make a judgment as to which one is the most likely to happen. So in this very simple task of what happens next, we can ask students to activate a lot of cognitive processes in their mind. And this is the next one is something that we generally tend to do, is we ask the students to defend their opinions. When they say something, for example, I don't know, I like this Instagram post, we should question them. And the best question we can ask is, why? Why do you like this post? By doing this, we're asking them first to activate all the language they know about pictures or their feelings, and then put it into practice to be able to reflect on their own thinking, which was one of those traits that we needed to encourage in our students, and actually use the language to talk about how they feel or why they feel what they feel. At very low levels, we can ask them to use with Venn diagrams, and this is very good for them because it's a visual organizer and they love things that are visual. For those of you who might not know what a Venn diagram is, it's an overlapping of two or more circles, and in each of the circles we're going to place a concept, an idea, an opinion, and in the middle in the overlapping area, we have to find things in common. So once we have studied different types of houses, we might put draw two circles overlapping and write apartment in one and house in the other, and find that pairs or groups of students find what is unique to each of the concepts or each of the types of housing and what they have in common. So again, they will have to apply all they know about houses, about rooms, about furniture, about what a family needs to create this visual organizer of their thoughts. We're asking them to be inquisitive about their own learning, about what they know already. This next one, is an activity that we have in the Oxford International Junior Syllabus. It's an activity at an A2 level. In this lesson, we are going to make plans with will and going to, and we're going to use vocabulary related to outdoor activities and food. And my very first question, my trigger to this topic, is this activity that you can see on your screens. So I showed them a picture because I'm a fan of visual exploitation, and show them this picture. This acts as a trigger, and I say, okay, we're going to a picnic to this place. I want you to work in groups or in pairs and agree on 5 things that we're going to need for this picnic. They love this activity because it's asking them to think of a lot of vocabulary, a lot of things, concepts that they have in their mind, like, I don't know, equipment for outdoor activities, food, games. Then they have to classify these different concepts. Then they have to choose the 5 things that they want. And then I'm adding the social element in which they have to negotiate with somebody else and agree. If each of them has 5 things, they need to agree on only 5 things that they need to take to this picnic. So they're going to negotiate, they're going to evaluate which of these objects or things is the best to carry. And at the end of the activity, they will have to justify their options with me and with the class and say why they have chosen these 5 things. And they enjoy this, and it takes a good 15 minutes for them to agree on 5 things that they need for this picnic in this beautiful lake. At a B1 level and above, they already have enough tools to distinguish between main and supportive arguments, and this is what I was telling you at the beginning. Given a text or a longer or just a paragraph, they not only have to differentiate or distinguish and pick up different ideas, they also have to evaluate them and tell me which ones are main ideas or main arguments and which ones are supporting arguments. They can also compare the meaning and connotation of words. Again, they are mature enough to know that skinny and thin are not the same, even though they have a similar meaning, or cheap and economical are not the same as relaxed and laid back. They are able to explore the language or the language items in context and, let's say, take out that connotation, negative or positive, that the author or the writer gives to his words. We can also ask them to distinguish, and this is a very, let's say, a very useful activity for life, not just for the language classroom, to distinguish between fact and opinions. Given any piece of news, give them any piece of news and ask them first to distinguish between the different concepts or the different statements, and then tell them to look for the bias in the text. What are the clues that language gives me to tell me that we are in the presence, or we are in front of an opinion rather than a fact? And by doing this, every time they're going to analyze a piece of news, they're going to spot certain language items that are going to be like warning signs. This is an opinion rather than a fact. And then I can go all creative at a V1 level and ask them to create an ad on anything we are working with. Let's say we are working with, again, different types of houses. Sorry, I'm not very creative today. And we have to advertise this particular house or this particular apartment in Airbnb. Let's create an ad. Why are we creating an ad? You might mean, okay, this is a very creative thing. We are not going through the process in the staircase, but we are. We are actually asking them to take this flat and find every feature that makes it particular, then evaluate these features against the audience they want to advertise to, and then come up with something creative that puts forward their ideas on what are the most important elements of this flat and why people would like to rent it. So far, so good. Yes. This is probably one of my very favorite activities from the junior syllabus that we are working with, and it is a good activity because a critical mind is a questioning mind, and this activity builds on questions, and it also builds on intercultural awareness, and this is something that we need to try to aim in our classes. The students that come to our courses come from a very particular audience, let's say, and for some of them, this picture might be completely alien to us. So our job is to take them out a little bit from their bubble and show them something different and question them about these differences. The first question or the first instruction I'm going to give them is, what questions come to your mind when you see this picture? This can be done as a whole class activity, and each student will come up with one question, and maybe the questions remain unanswered, or maybe somebody else attempts to reply or to answer the question. the most important part of this activity is for them to question something that is different to them, and to come up with questions that are not yes/no questions, but maybe more open-ended questions. The second part of this introduction to the topic of creating of narrative tenses, because this is a lesson in narrative tenses, is to think of 5 questions, to take the role of a journalist and to think of 5 questions they would like to ask these ladies. This can be done individually or in pairs, and it's very rich. Again, the questions would probably get no answer, but the fact that they are putting themselves in the shoes of a journalist who are like reflecting or being sympathetic to this latest reality is what I want from this activity. And so my job is done there if they are able to produce 5 questions to ask these people. And you might be impressed at the depth that they can ask questions at. At a V2 level and above, things get very interesting. We can ask them to summarize the text. So in previous levels, they spotted main words, then they spotted different ideas in a text or a paragraph, and now I ask them to make these ideas their own and put them in a summary. So everything that they've been practicing before, analyzing a text, assessing the value of each of the arguments, will now come into place to create something completely new in their own words, but also using words from the text that are useful or that they think are relevant to the topic they are writing or speaking about. I can also ask them to categorize words according to context or register. Words might have the same meaning, but you might not use them in the same context, and this is part of their improving their awareness as foreign language speakers. This is something that a native speaker would be very aware of when to use a word and when not to use the word, but sometimes foreign language learners do not have this ability, and we need to help them become more aware of this different context register dichotomy, let's say. This is a particularly difficult one, working with jokes, but it's definitely one that is very worth it. Why? Jokes work with wordplays or with double meanings. And what makes a joke funny is when we place these double meanings into an appropriate context. So for a language learner, this takes their cognitive skills up to the staircase immediately, because we are not only asking them to we're asking them to process the language at a different level, and we're asking them to analyze the context, the paradigmatic contents, and bring the two things together to make sense of the joke. If they can find it funny or not, it's probably a cultural thing, but asking them to analyze why people might find it funny, it's already worth it. Debates are another way to foster critical thinking skills. Why? Because we are forcing our students to listen in to their peers and consider the arguments they are saying, consider what they are saying in readiness to make a decision on how to answer to their arguments. Personally, I think that the most important part of the debate sometimes takes place before the debate, when we give the group of students their stance, the stance they have to stand up for, and we ask them to analyze the weaknesses and strengths of this stance. By doing this, we're asking them to, again, dissect the concepts that they are working with and make judgments as to which one might be most relevant to bring up in the debate and not. And then if we wanted to bring this to yet another level of complexity, we can ask students to exchange their stances. So once they have analyzed the stance against, they have to defend the stance for. And then we're asking them to analyze a completely different set of ideas. For all these activities I've been talking about before, flipped classroom techniques are very advisable and recommendable. Why? First, because we're asking students to use English outside the classroom, in that they have to investigate, research an idea, and then bring them back into the classroom. And we are also asking them to become more responsible for their own learning. And then the time that we didn't spend explaining a concept or explaining something in the classroom, we can use for debates, for example. We can make use of this time in more challenging cognitive skills or cognitive tasks. And finally, one example from our junior syllabus again. Each of the lessons in the junior syllabus starts with telling students what the lesson is going to be about, because we want to give them a context to work with. This one in particular is about school stress. And before we start talking about should and shouldn't, if I were you, I would, and all these grammar structures we want them to use in the class, I introduced the topic by showing the name of the topic, school stress, and asking them to give me or to write one thing that they know about the topic. Once they have written this, I go to the second level, one thing that they think they know about the topic, but they're not sure about. And third, one thing that other people think about the topic, but might not be true. What I'm doing with this is actually taking my students into 3 different levels of information. I'm asking them to give them a fact, to give me a fact about school stress, something they know. I'm asking them to tell me something they think but not sure about, which makes it an opinion. And third, I am asking them to separate their opinions and their knowledge from other people's knowledge or prejudice or bias and tell me about that. So I'm asking them to actually analyze their own idea of school stress and categorize it into fact, opinion, and prejudice. This very simple activity is incredibly rich, critical thinking wise. But if you, on Monday, well, after the school holidays, you go back to your classrooms feeling all inspired by my talk, and you want to put one of these activities into practice, you might find that students just stare at you. And why would they stare at you? This is such a good activity. Sometimes we are not trained, and I include myself in this we, because sometimes we have not been given the training to work with critical thinking skills. We don't know what we have to do. And this is where we need to take, or why we need to take, a process approach to critical thinking skills. Critical thinking skills, as any other skills, as listening, reading, speaking, and writing, needs a process approach sometimes, in which the teacher guides the student through the process so that they can come up with a good outcome for the task. So when creating an ad, so that we don't have a rush of creativity, we have to tell students all the different steps they have to go through in order to create this ad. By doing this, we are guiding them through the process, and then when they find a similar task, they will know what to do. So we need to take, at the beginning, a process approach to critical thinking and critical thinking activities. And those activities, in my opinion, are very interesting, and I tend to do them quite a lot with even with my adult students, who find them really interesting, and sometimes they don't know what to do about. And it has helped me wonder why we should take critical thinking into the ELT classroom when it is so difficult already to do it to somebody, for somebody in their own language. Why should we do it in the ELT classroom, where everything is a little bit more difficult? First, because we lived in a globalized world, and that means different ideas, different points of view, and we need to give students the tools to create their own judgment. Second, because we lived in the age of information revolution, and we are bombarded with different types of information, with different sources. And again, we need to give students tools to process all this information that comes to them, and so that they can assess the reliability and the validity of the information that is coming to them. And third, because it has a key role in language learning. All communication, all authentic communication takes or involves some degree of critical thinking. And we need to expose our students to these communicative skills, and we need to improve them. And also we want them to practice their cognitive skills, not only at a LOTS level, lower order thinking skills, but also at a higher order thinking skills. And this is why we need to include critical thinking in ELT. And just to finish my monologue, I want you to reflect on something. So have a look at this scale from 1 to 4. You're going to now see 3 different ideas. I want you to rank them. I want you to tell me how you agree or disagree with these ideas that I'm going to present you. And this is, again, another critical thinking activity that you can do with any concept in your classrooms. So first, what do you think? I feel I understand the concept of critical thinking skills. How can you grade yourselves with that one? What do you think? It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. 3. Good, that's a good one. More. Thank you, Sandra. Let's see who else grades themselves. Another 3, a 4. Very good. Another one. I feel I can use at least one critical thinking activity with one of my classes. This will force you to think about your classes and think if this is going to be interesting for them, if they will be able to do it, with what topic in the book you're going to do it with. Good, that's a great one. And the last one. I feel I can exploit a picture or a topic to practice critical thinking skills in my class. And this is particularly useful because it asks us to think about the materials that we have in hand. Can we exploit them? Can we take them out from the listen and repeat into more critical thinking skills? What do you reckon? Have a look, so many. I'm so happy, please, all 4s. I love it. Good, double 4 there for room 2202. Very good. So this is what I wanted to achieve with this talk, and I'm very, very happy with the results. So this is all from my side. Thank you. And if you have any questions, here I am.
Okay, Agus, would you share this part of the talk? Agus?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vale. And I'll be ready to pass forward the questions that people may post in the YouTube chat.
If anything. If not, I can fill the time. I can talk for ages.
One of the things that came up when we were in class talking about critical thinking with the 4th-year students was techniques to foster critical thinking, and I think you've been through some of them. I don't know if you could share some more in relation to children, probably, because how do we manage this thing in which we are aware that children find difficulty with abstract thinking because of their development stages, and the higher order thinking skills that in many cases demand abstract thinking. So how do we bridge that gap, let's say?
We have to bridge it through things that are concrete to them. Again, when I said about Venn diagrams, I particularly love them because you can make Venn diagrams, but you can also create the concepts for them. So if you don't trust them enough, or if you don't think that they are going to be aware of splitting the different parts of a house and then put them into the different Venn diagrams, you can create 2 circles on the floor and have different concepts in cutouts and ask them, okay, so each of these can be placed either in one side of the Venn diagram in the floor, in another side, or in the middle. You can divide these different cutouts to the different students, and then they have 1 minute to put the cutouts on the floor and to work with that. So make it as concrete as possible. I don't know, with the categories again, with the categories of vocabulary, you are fostering that with, again, you can give them cutouts or give them different parts. Okay, let's put these different pieces of furniture in the different parts of this poster of the house, and they can place things in there and they can manipulate the knowledge. And this is especially important for young learners as well. So I think that we don't have to be specially ambitious, but we can, we have to be able to see that even if they don't seem to be doing much, by asking them to do very simple things, so very simple things like putting a poster or putting a cutout in a poster, they are already exercising these cognitive skills that we want to help them develop. Maria Jose has asked, how do we make sure that the solution to a problem is logical? Well, critical thinking is a very personal thing, right? There isn't a right or wrong for a solution to a problem, and it's a very personal outcome as well. So as long as you have made sure that your students have actually considered the problem from different perspectives and have analyzed all the possible outcomes of these possible solutions to a problem, you should consider your job is done with them, because they have used this critical or these cognitive skills and they have put them in place. If the thing is right or not, this will be up to life to be decided, but we cannot say that a solution is right or wrong sometimes, especially if it is to an abstract problem or if it is a matter of opinion. There might be some mathematical problems that, okay, yes, you have found the right solution because it works, but in other things, we just have to be happy with the process we take our students through. Does that answer your question? Kind of? Okay.
In the YouTube chat, Lucia asks how we manage with materials and critical thinking skills.
Okay, this is particularly interesting because we are seeing a lot of publishing houses going into critical thinking. There is a little section in all of those new materials saying critical thinking. You might see lovely things coming from National Geographic or even Pearson, and there is a very good book by Oxford as well. But we don't need that. These activities that I have presented to you are very low-cost activities in that you don't need any of those expensive books to work with them. Just need a picture and the questioning skills and asking your students the right open questions, and you're already triggering this critical thinking or these cognitive skills that you want them to practice. So take a good provocative picture from the internet and bring it into the class and challenge your students to think beyond their bubbles, let's say, and you will be already practicing critical thinking without needing these fancy materials that are very, very expensive and sometimes do not reach us.
Another of the questions is
yes.
If we have to question our own critical thinking first before working with our students, I suppose?
Yeah, of course we can, because how are we going to teach something that we have to practice what we preach. So if we're going to preach on critical thinking, we have to be able to do these critical thinking activities ourselves first. So if they see that we can go through all the steps in the ladder ourselves, or all the steps in the staircase ourselves, it's a good way to actually telling them how to do this. So of course, we need to practice it first ourselves and be aware of what we are doing. We need to be reflective of our own thinking and work on that before we try our students to do that. And I think that in this case, what education is moving forward towards critical thinking, and I think that the job you guys are doing in teacher training is good for that, because we are trying to. It's not like in my time, some of my teachers, I wouldn't say that they weren't very keen on critical thinking, and sometimes it was just a passing of information. Nowadays, I think that we have all changed and adapted, and from a teacher training perspective, we are moving forward towards analyzing knowledge before trying to pass it to students or trying to help students acquire this knowledge. So I think we are moving forward on that, and we are becoming more reflective teachers each day.
Is there a way to make sure that we are open-minded enough to foster these critical thinking skills?
It's like asking ourselves, are we crazy enough or are we normal enough? We are never going to be able to, because it's like there is not an IQ test yet that teaches you or that tests you or assesses your critical thinking skills. I think that the way we navigate the world of these days is also a great test in itself. Because if we are able to, when we process information that comes from our WhatsApp groups, our beloved WhatsApp groups, and we are able to tell that this is fake news, that this is something that somebody else has written for the purpose of entertaining himself, we are already practicing our skills, and we can consider ourselves successful in the critical thinking area, let's say. So this should be our test, how we navigate and how we approach information, and how we process everything that we learn every day. For example, for your students, whenever you teach them something, and if they don't take it for granted, you should be happy as a teacher, because they are not taking what you say as a holy word, but they are questioning, and by questioning, they are seeing the validity of what you're saying. So that is already critical thinking.
Okay.
Alcida says, how can we make critical thinking activities more learner-centered when teaching this in a virtual context? Oh, by just asking them a question and waiting for them to reply, you are making it learner-centered, because you might realize when you do this that if you ask them a question now, or tell me 5 questions you will ask these ladies, like the picture I showed you before, you might notice there is great silence at the beginning. Nobody's going to say anything. But we as teachers in the virtual world, we have to embrace the pause, and we have to give them time to think. And in this silence, they're going to hopefully feel uncomfortable enough to start speaking. And when they start speaking, one will say one thing, and it will be a chain reaction. All of them will want to participate, because these ideas are in their mind. And of course, they have ways to ask questions to these ladies, and they will have loads of questions to ask them, but sometimes they don't dare. So as teachers in the virtual world, we have to be patient and take a step back and let them time to think and to dare explore the language and use the language to explore their own ideas and their own opinions on the world. Sorry, I interrupted. Faustina.
No, that's fine. Another question is how to deal with shy students who are reluctant to speak in class.
Put them in pairs. Pair them with somebody they like at the beginning, and then with somebody they don't like, because they need to be able to talk to people they don't know, and they need to be able to talk with people they are not super comfortable with. But at the beginning, put them in a safe group, so they are in their comfort zone from an emotional point of view, and that hopefully will let them speak. And then when they are confident enough, and when they received enough positive feedback from us and from their peers, expose them to the rest of the class. At the beginning, they just need to feel comfortable enough to speak.
Vale, you talked about the staircase, going along the steps towards creativity. If we take B2 level, do we take for granted that they have already walked the ladder, or
No.
do we? All right.
Never. And this I will answer from a personal experience. When I was learning English, I got to Juan 23 with a V2 level. And I put V2 level because I was good in grammar, but some of my skills suffered because of those grammar skills. And while I was learning the language, I was always asked to think in English. And I could never think in English. And I felt so frustrated because I couldn't think in English. I couldn't do what my teachers demanded me to do, to think in English. And then while exploring critical thinking, I realized that actually I wasn't able to think in English because very few times I had been asked to actually carry out a thinking skill or an actual thinking in English. I had never used the language to think things through the language. So again, this is a skill that we need to foster from very young learners until they reach B2 if we want to get something in B2, not just for the sake of the teacher who is teaching B2 level, but also for the sake of the students who are going to use these skills as they progress in life. So no, we cannot take it for granted. And you're going to face many classes in which you go with these very creative activities like creating an ad or creating a story or coming up with a very good ending for a story. And they're just going to blankly stare at you because they don't know how to do it. So let's not take things for granted. Let's take a process approach to these skills. And if we're sure that they know the tools or they know the steps of how to do it, then we can just throw the task at them and make it more learner-centered and let them work on their own. Hope this answers the question.
Yeah, perfectly.
Sorry for the interruption. I don't know whether you have more questions. We can listen to a couple more questions. No. Okay, so we can end up now. We would like to thank Vale, yes, for being so kind to meet us and to share with us all the knowledge you have on this topic. It's been a pleasure. You know, it was a great talk. And then I would also like to thank everybody to join us, and Ines from the REC, who's always there, attentive to any queries, and she's someone who.
Gabi, we cannot hear you. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was talking to myself. All right. First, I would like to thank Vale. Yes, it's been a great talk. Very interesting. Thank you very much. we are really grateful, yes, for this. Then I'd like to thank everybody to join us again in a talk. And I would also like to thank Ines from the RIEC, who's always behind us, helping us in the organization as well, Ines Kea. So thanks, everyone, and we hope to see you in our next talk, yes? All right? Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you. It's been a pleasure.